What's up guys? So in the last video what we finished doing was adding both of the paddles for player 1 and player 2 and giving it the logic to where if we click W or S for player 1 and the up and down arrow key for player 2, the player moves and stops at the top and the bottom of the screen. In this video what we're going to be working on is actually adding the ball to the game, as well as having it to where we can keep score and have the game run again whenever one player scores. So the first thing we're going to do is go up here right under where we created the class for the player, and we're going to create another class called ball. It's going to be another object, and the first thing we're going to create is the init function for it. So we're going to say def underscore underscore init. We don't really need any parameters for the ball, so we can just kind of keep that empty for now. We will say self.x is going to be equal to the screen width divided by 2 minus half of the width of the ball, so that'll be perfectly centered. I know we haven't created that, but we'll create it in a second. So we'll say self.width. Let's go up above, and we're going to create two variables before we give it an x and a y. We'll say self.width is going to be equal to, instead of saying self.width and height, we're just gonna, since it's going to be round, it's going to be a ball, we're going to just create a radius. So we'll say self.radius is going to be equal to, let's say 5 pixels, and if that's not good we can always change that in a second. And then so here we'll say for the x we will say the screen width divided by 2 minus self.radius, since that's half of the diameter of the ball. And then we will do the same thing for y, so we'll say self.y is going to equal the screen height divided by 2 minus self.radius. So that'll perfectly center it in the window. We're also going to give it a color, so we can make the ball, let's make it white for now. We can always change that, or if you want to change it, by all means just type in the three values, the RGB values that you want. I'm just going to keep it white because I think it shows a little bit better on the background that we currently have. I also want to create the x and the y velocity for the ball here inside of the init function, but we also have to make it to where it's going to be a little bit randomized. And to do that, we're going to go up to the very top of the code, right under where we imported pygame, and we're also going to import random. So random is going to give us a couple of random functions that'll help us have the game to where it's not just the same thing over and over again. So it'll always be something new. Like sometimes the ball will go to player 1 first, sometimes it'll go to player 2, sometimes it'll have a really fast x and a slower y, and sometimes it'll be the opposite. It'll just kind of have it to where it's always randomized and changing. So the first thing we're going to do is create two variables. One's going to be called x direction, one's y direction. So we can just say xd is going to equal random dot choice, and we want that value to be in a list of 2, and it'll be -1 or 1. Whoops. And then we can copy this line, paste it, and we'll say yd. So now it'll give us either a -1 or 1 for the x direction, and a -1 or 1 for the y direction. What this means is, so at the farther right you go, the more the x is increasing. So if we have a +1, it'll be going towards player 2, and if we have a -1, it'll be going towards player 1. And then as for the y direction, if we have a -1, the ball will be going up initially, and then if we have a positive y direction, it'll be going down initially. So that's just going to have 4 possibilities of where the ball could be going right off the bat. Yeah, so once we have that created, what we're going to do is we're going to create the self.x velocity, and it's going to equal 8. I think that'll be a good speed. And then we'll times the x direction, and then we'll copy that line, paste it, and then instead of saying xd, we'll say y direction and self.yv. So now we've got the velocities for the ball, and that is looking good. So that's going to be it for the init function. Next, what we're going to do is create the draw function. So we'll say def draw, just like in the other class. We'll pass in the window, and we are going to say pygame dot draw dot circle. And what we're going to do in here is pass in window, and then the color that we want it to be that we declared earlier, so self.color. And then in here we don't pass in a list of 4 values. Instead, we're going to give it a tuple of 2. One's going to be the x, the other will be the y. So self.x and self.y. And then after that tuple, we're going to give it one more parameter for the radius of the circle that we want, which we created up above, self.radius. So that's going to be it for drawing the circle. The next function that we're going to need is going to be called hit. And what hit is going to do is it's basically if it hits either one of the paddles, it's going to change the x direction to make it go the opposite way. So we can say def hit, and this doesn't need any parameters. All we have to do is say self.x velocity is going to times equals -1. So if the x velocity was, for example, 8 and it hits the right paddle, we'll call hit and then it'll become -8 and go the opposite direction towards the other player. After we do that, we need one last function called reset Pong, or reset the ball, whatever you want to call it. And for now, we're just going to pass and pass. We'll come back to this a little bit later. So now that we've got the draw, the hit, and the initialization functions, what we need to do is create the actual ball. Let me just make sure I capitalized ball. Yep, yes I did. So now let's go under where we created the players, and we're going to say ball equals ball, and then just empty parentheses because there's no parameters. So now we've got that. What we have to do next is add the ball inside of the redraw game window so we can see it on the screen. So we are going to say ball dot draw and pass in window, just like the others. There's actually one more method we can implement just to kind of save a couple lines later on. We'll call this move. So we'll say def move. It doesn't need any parameters, but all we're going to do here is just say self.x. It's going to plus equal self.x velocity, and self.y will plus equals self.y velocity. And so now, in order to actually make it move, so the difference between the player and the ball is the player moves depending on the key presses, but the ball is always moving on its own. So instead of like checking to see if a certain key is pressed, we can just go above all those if statements under clock.tick, and we are simply going to call ball.move. So now every time it gets called, it's going to increase the velocity that was randomly assigned to it inside of the init function. So that is looking good. We can run this and we should see the ball. So it went kind of quick. I'm not sure if you were able to see that. Let me run it one more time. So yeah, as you can see, it shot off the screen really fast. But the interesting thing about this is that the ball essentially has 4 possible directions it can go. It can either go to the right and up, to the right and down, to the left and up, and to the left and down. So what we have to do next is check for collisions between the ball and the players, as well as collisions between the ball and the top and the bottom of the window, because if it hits the top or the bottom, we want it to just bounce. One more thing is I think the velocity was too fast, so let's go up to where we declared it. We said 8 initially. Let's change that to like 5, just to make it a little bit slower and easier to keep up with. And that should be a little bit better. So the way that we're going to check to see if there has been a collision is by using a couple of if statements that we can just create right under ball.move. One's going to be for player 1 and one's going to be for player 2, and then we'll have the if statements if it just touches the top or the bottom. Let's create the top and the bottom if statements first because they're a little bit shorter. So what we'll say is if ball.y is less than 0, which means it went too high, then we are simply going to say ball.y velocity is going to times equals -1, just making it go back down. And actually we can, instead of creating another if statement, we can just say or ball.y plus ball.radius times 2, so that's going to be like the very bottom of the ball. If that is greater than the screen height, we also want to change the y velocity, make it reverse. So we'll say greater than the screen height. So now let's run this. And as you can see, it hit the top left and then it bounced back down, which is exactly what we needed. The next thing we have to do is going to be checking for collisions between the ball and the paddles. So let us go down under that if statement, and what we're going to do is we are going to say if ball.x is, so let's start off with player 1. So the way we'll know that there has been a collision is if the left side of the ball, which is the ball.x. Okay, so I actually realized I made a little mistake. So basically the difference between rectangles and circles in pygame is that the rectangle's x and y is always going to start off as the top left corner, whereas with a circle it's going to automatically be set to the center. So essentially one problem that we have is up above, right here, we don't need these extra minus self.radiuses because that's actually going to take it out of the center. So just having it to where it's setting it to the screen width and height will be the center. And right here, instead of saying times 2, we just say plus the ball.radius. So that'll kind of fix that up. Now let's move on to the if statements we were just working on, checking between the player collisions and the ball. We'll do player 1 first. So if the ball.x minus the ball.radius is less than or equal to player.x plus player.width. So what this if statement right here is doing is it's checking to see if the farthest to the right point of the player is overlapping with the leftmost point of the ball. So if both of those, so if that basically returns true, we just need to say player 1, not just player. Then what we're also going to do is check to see. Actually, we need an and. So and ball dot x minus the radius minus ball dot radius is greater than or equal to player 1 dot x. So it's checking to see if the leftmost point of the ball is between the beginning and the end of the player. Then we're going to check to see if the ball is also between the top and the bottom of the paddle. So we'll say if ball dot y, which is the center of the ball, so we have to say minus the radius minus ball dot radius to get the actual top y of the ball is greater than or equal to player dot y and ball dot y minus ball dot radius is less than or equal to player 1 dot y plus player 1 dot height, and right here we just have to say player 1 as well. And so this is going to check if the top of the ball is, well, do we really need to check? I'm debating how accurate we want to make our collision check it, because right now I'm checking to see if the top or the bottom is going to be lined up, like essentially inside of the paddle. But we can make it a little bit simpler and just check the center, but then we might get like a little bit of offset. So I think we should make it like this. So yeah, this is going to be a bit of a longer if statement. So after we say all this, let's wrap all this in parentheses. So put parentheses in the beginning, and another one at the very end. And then we need to say or, and the new set of parentheses, ball.y. This one's going to be the exact same, so you can actually just copy all this. And instead of saying minus the radius, we just need to say plus the radius. So plus ball.radius and plus ball.radius. And then end that with a colon. And I'm trying to remember. So I don't think Python lets us have if statements be on 2 separate lines. So this will be a pretty long line, but I mean, the second part is exactly the same as the first part. The only difference is we said plus instead of minus. And so now that should be good. So make sure you have this all copied. And then what we're going to do is, so if those both return true, that's when we're going to call ball.hit. So this is going to basically check to see if the ball hit player 1. In order to check if the ball hit player 2, we can copy this. So we'll copy these 3 lines, paste them right down below, and all we really have to change is just the top if statement, not the bottom one will stay consistent. And what we'll do is we'll say if ball.x plus ball.radius is greater than or equal to player 1.x, we'll take off the plus the width, and ball.x plus ball.radius is less than or equal to player 1.x plus player, it should be player 2, player 2.x. So let's change these player 1s to 2s. So right here we need to change it. And then let's just copy player 2 and paste it for every instance of player 1 down here. Yeah, so just make sure you change all the player 1s to player 2s. And those two collision checks should be good. So now let's run this and see what we've got. So no, we just missed it. And we don't have a way to reset it yet. So let's actually just go down here. Alright, so right there I hit the ball. If I hit it again right here, as soon as I hit it, the X gets reversed. And it all works pretty smoothly. I know it's kind of laggy. My computer just really sucks. Like it's a 7-year-old Mac, so it's not the best, and the memory's all filled. It's just a very, very poor computer. But it's okay. I mean, it shows you what you've got. Hopefully on yours it's kind of running a little more smoothly. So now we've got the collisions all working. What we have to do next is check to see if someone scored, as well as when someone scores, reset the Pong or the ball inside at the center of the screen. I think we'll do that in the next video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any questions or if you ran into any problems, just comment down below and I'll definitely try to help you sort that out as soon as possible. Like the video if you enjoyed and subscribe to stay updated with the rest of the series. Peace.